AFK Arena is a very player versus environment, or PvE for short, based game. However, we do get very deep into player versus player, or PvP for short, as we get further into the game, and it's an absolute fantastic feature. So we're going to take a look at the difference between the two and the way your mindset might shift between playing in the two formats. The main differences between PvE and PvP is obviously PvP you're playing against other players, and PvE you're playing against, you know, the computer and the AI and things that the devs have set in place. Now, the thing with PvE in this game, being the main modes we're going to focus on are campaign and tower modes, you're going to be at a very heavy level deficit compared to your enemies, whereas in PvP, your levels are normally going to be a lot closer to the enemy team. However, in PvP, you're going to be wanting to build some more reliable teams because you only get one shot at victory against your enemies, and if you lose, you lose. In campaign and tower, you can really use the RNG of battles to your advantage due to the fact that you can just keep retrying stages until you get the RNG that works, or basically just the luck on your side. So the first thing that comes to mind is a recently introduced hero, and that is Pippa. Pippa has a lot of randomness in her abilities, whether she's going to turn herself or the enemy into an acorn. She's going to be teleporting enemies around the battlefield, and then she has a randomized effect on her ultimate of which ultimate she will actually use. So things like that in a PvE or campaign and tower sense are going to be very valuable, because yes, you could enter the battle the first time and lose in 3 seconds. However, if that luck or RNG goes in your favor, you can then just keep retrying until it does, and you might eventually get the victory. As we move over into PvP, now there's 3 main formats of PvP that are always in the game. We have the Arena of Heroes, which is 1 team versus 1 team. Then we have Legends Challenger Tournament, which is 3 teams versus 3 teams. And then we have the Legends Championship, which is only for the pinnacle of players. So not everyone is going to be competing in this all the time. However, you can still place wagers on the team that you think will win. Now, the main ones we're going to focus on is going to be the Arena of Heroes and the Legends Challenger Tournament. Now, in the early stages of the game, when you're still using that carry hero, so in the arena, you're fighting similar type enemies who have one hero leveled higher than the rest, there's a few units that really stand out to use to really shut them down. Something like Tassie, which can banish the enemy's strongest unit, is going to be fantastic because it basically leaves your strongest team against their weaker team, because their strongest unit that they're relying on is going to be out of the battle. And Forks effectively does the exact same thing, but for a longer period of time. So those 2 units are very, very strong in the early stages of the game, just for being able to have your strongest hero fighting off against their 4 weakest heroes, while their strongest one is banished. Now, as you progress further in the game, when you stop just using your main team because they're the strongest ones, you're going to be starting to think of strategies, and in the arena, you're going to be able to place an arena defense. In the standard arena, something like Gwyneth is going to really struggle in this format, because if you place a Gwyneth who really needs to stay at range to be effective, if you place her on your defense team, the enemy can easily take in an Athalia, a Nara, an Iron, anything that's going to drag or just interrupt that effect of the Gwyneth is really going to hurt them. So you've really got to consider when you're building your defense team what you put into it, and try and have things that aren't just easily shut down by one enemy unit like that Gwyneth. In PvP, the meta is always shifting. People find new teams that counter previous good teams, so it's a very community-driven meta in the PvP sense. However, some units that are always going to be useful across the board in PvE and PvP, which are very strong to build along the way, are things like Iron and Rowan, just really solid normal faction units that you can get a lot of use out of. The Celestials and Hypergeans are very strong in the PvP format as well. Something like Zolrath is going to slow time and allow you to enter the battle before your enemy, letting you get your abilities off faster. And that's that sort of reliance that we spoke about earlier on building a reliable team, not an RNG based team. And something like Zolrath really helps like that. To a lesser extent, something like Leica will really help out in that sense as well, because she is going to enable your team to get their abilities off a little bit faster. Now I want to spend a little bit of time on the Legends Challenger tournament. Now this one is a 3-team versus 3-team contest. You need to win 2 battles to win overall. So you can place your teams however you like, find the synergies that you enjoy and try and build 3 teams. However, the thing you really want to aim to do is build 2 very strong teams and then have a bit of a weaker team. And the best strategy to go for to win in this tournament is to put your strongest team against the enemy's second strongest team, and then your second strongest team against the enemy's weakest team, and then allow your weakest team to lose to their strongest team. That is going to be the best way to get the 2 victories. Now, keep in mind that team synergies and stuff like that are going to come into play as well. For instance, if you have a Gwyneth, I'll use the example from earlier, that you're relying on as your damage dealer, and they have like a Nara and a Nathalia on their team that are pretty much going to be able to shut out your Gwyneth no matter where you put her. That's obviously going to be a battle that you will probably lose. So in that case, you can shift it around. But in a general sense, when you jump into the Legends Challenger tournament, up the top of the screen, you can see the power levels of your enemy teams to get a rough gauge on how strong they are, maybe the type of gear they have and stuff like that. And then you can just place your teams according to that, as long as you have some synergies that aren't hard countered by their strategy. You should be good to go and try and claim a victory. So with those differences between PvE and PvP out of the way, I wanted to talk a little bit about what to focus on. So for the progression of your account, it's normally going to be better to focus on the units that you want to build for your PvE progression, because that's going to get you more resources, get you further progressed in the game, allow you to complete more events easier. And with that, then you can shift your focus over to PvP units. So focus on the PvE progression of the game, because it's going to get you a lot more valuable stuff. And then as you get further and further into the game, you can start looking towards niche PvP units. However, a lot of the general progression units for PvE are going to be very, very useful in the player versus player environment as well. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have an awesome day, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers.